Hello, everybody. Welcome back once again to the Crew First Culture podcast. My name is Jeremy, and thank you, as always, for spending some time with us today. Today, another guest that I'm excited to have on. Got on Mr. Marc Davidson. How you doing, Marc?
Good, sir. How about yourself?
Pretty good, pretty good. So, when I first heard of you was on the Weekly Scrap, and I bring up Weekly Scrap a lot because it seems like a lot of his guests just echo, all the things that I enjoy and I like, and so I don't know. I guess we just have similar taste and leadership styles. So, but really enjoyed what you guys were talking about, and we'll get into a little bit of that later.
Sure.
But go ahead and tell us a little bit about yourself and as much or little as you want, and we'll just get into it.
Yeah, no, I appreciate you have me on, and to me, any opportunity to talk about leadership in the fire service and what we need in our craft and our trade is a big deal, because hopefully there's ripples in the pond from that. Hopefully at some point there's even one nugget that somebody buys into. They're like, okay, that's cool. I'm digging it. I'm gonna give that a shot. So really appreciate it. Really appreciate what you do, and a shout out to Corley also with the Weekly Scrap, and just any of these voices that help get the word out there is super important for our entire craft. So a little bit about myself. Been on the job in Fairfax County for over 25 years now. Volunteered in North Carolina, Pennsylvania, and Maryland in succession. Before that, prior to that, I was fortunate enough to spend 8.5 years dressing like a tree in the Marine Corps, and then before that, I was pretty much a juvenile delinquent. So there's not before that, it gets kind of sketchy. But all that said, been very fortunate with my time in Fairfax, where I've had a very varied career, but I've always been at our busiest houses: firefighter, bucket firefighter, engine driver, then truck driver, and then truck OIC. And that was, to me, really where I was able to cut my teeth and get my experience on the line and make a lot of mistakes, and then learn from those mistakes. And then I had an opportunity to teach with basic training, which was very foundational for me. Just took what I already knew I loved to do, which was to teach. I started that process while I was in the Marine Corps, and then really hone it. I think that 4 years was a big deal in my evolution as an instructor and teacher. And then a little over 4 years ago, I got a phone call and essentially the phone call was, are we allowed to use terms of art on this show? Is this a family friendly show?
Oh yeah, no.
Yeah. So
if it comes out, it comes out.
Yeah. Basically, the boss who had just taken over our training division said, "Hey, you seem to be bitching a lot about officer training. Do you want to do something about it?" And of course, I should have just said, "No, it's much easier to sit around the kitchen table and bitch about things and do something about it." So, no, it was an interesting. There's a longer story to that, but at the end of it, that phone call was the first domino in taking what had been an ad hoc group of us who were trying to really push this narrative about training for leadership, and formalize it. And then 2.5 years ago, oh no, not quite 2.5, a little over 2 years ago, after being at it for that couple of years, the section was formalized, and now we're on this, hopefully this unbreakable line going forward to continue that for our organization. So that's the Reader's Digest version. I hate long walks on the beach. The beach is a stupid thing to do. I like a highly chlorinated swimming pool. Other than that,
Man, I'll take a beach right now with what I've been the weather
fair.
We've had here lately is
that's fair. And a quick shout out to everybody that's going Texas. I know you guys were hit hard, and just everybody that's going through this craziness right now. That take care of themselves and hope everything works out well.
Definitely. So Fairfax, what state is that?
Virginia. Fairfax County is contiguous to DC, kind of to the west and along the south. So if you picture a little crescent,
Gotcha.
just right outside of DC.
Okay. So I'm thinking right. You in the episode with Corley, you were talking about trying to get back on the line.
Mm-hmm.
As far as has that happened, or are you still in training division?
Still in the training division. It was funny. I was pushing a deal as much as you can. I was voicing very clearly that I needed, for my own sanity, if nothing else, I needed to get back out at it in March. And we were beginning to move to that. And then unfortunately got some news here at the Davidson Estates that is going to preclude that for a couple of months. My wife's going to need a significant surgery. So we're now looking at July. And at the point where I start walking the hallways mumbling, and there's a Robitussin bottle, but clearly I don't have a cold. That's when we know that the Davidson's kind of broke. But going back to the beginning. Going back to the beginning, the phone call 4 years and change ago was just, hey, do you want to come up here and let's see what we can do? There was no position, there was no portfolio, there was nothing. And 4 years later, I'm like, okay, I got, it's like the WWE. You get beat with that folding chair enough, you got to tap out. So, that's still on the horizon, but barring any other significant news, hopefully by July, I'll be back at it.
I understand that. Our training division it's very formal. I mean, I don't see anybody. Well, I say that we have had a few people kind of go over when things were getting rough and they needed help, and it was an informal thing like that. But it seems like nowadays with unions and everything else, that's kind of a strange deal to just kind of offer. You know what I mean? It's almost like it needs to be a position, or we're not doing stuff like that. So,
yeah, we're very fortunate. Unfortunate. Virginia is a state that has one of the lowest forms of collective bargaining and in that union management relationship. But with that, particularly Fairfax and those in the Metro DC region, the unions have managed to carve out a pretty strong position. So that with respect to union stuff, that's the deal. As far as this idea of that's one of the advantages of not having a CBA is that flexibility. There's good and bad to that. So, we could argue that all day long, but in this particular case, the fact that the chief training officer made a conscious decision to say, look, get up here. And he talked with our ops boss, got me detailed out of ops. It speaks to something that I talk on regularly, is that for any organization, these things are possible. The problem sometimes is the perception that, it's Fairfax County, Virginia. And Brunacini had a joke when he came out one year. He said, I can tell by your apparatus that when you run out of gas, you just go buy new ones. So, which is the pot calling, at the time, the pot calling the kettle. But we're very fortunate for the resources we have. But part of that battle is that perception that, in order to do officer development, in order to have a significant training function, you have to have deep pockets and this and that. And I can't say it enough. No, it doesn't. All the work that we did to get to a foundation that got us this formalized position was all ground up. Was all just, hey, what can we do? Literally a pot of coffee and 6 people around the kitchen table. That's what started it. So if we can do that, to me, any organization can make that same lift.
I think I don't even understand the mindset that is saying that it's going to cost a lot of money to do that. It's going to cost work. Yes. It's going to cost a lot of freaking work is what it's going to cost.
Oh, yes.
And it's weird to me that somebody would even think that. And if you are thinking it's going to cost some money, you need to kind of adjust what your thought process is, because it doesn't.
Yeah. And where are you going to invest your money? I get it. We got to get rigs on the road, and operations is the tip of the spear. That is obvious. But if you're cutting your training budget, and we suffered through this, there's a whole timeline where for 6 years we didn't have what was called at the time an officer development school because of budget. That 6 years to me is still having an impact on our organization, because for 6 years there was effectively no officer training occurring. Now you have this entire cohort, this generation of officers who has moved beyond that first rank, because an officer development school at the time for us was just for lieutenants, which whole other rant about that. At the end of it, that impact is still being felt because they moved up. They're captains now. They're battalion chiefs. They've moved on, and there's been no other training up until we got things started. That's negligent. And to have anybody just look at it and say, "Oh, we can't afford it." Can you afford the outcomes? And that is just so clear. You know, everything is about training, and that ability to impact somebody in the arc of their career to get them to do better. You can't miss those opportunities.
Yeah. And I guess where my mind is on that whole conversation is the money situation. Okay, if you're talking about a department, I don't care where it is, what it is, if you are low on money and you got to be tight and all that, surely you have some good leaders there, surely. Mm-hmm. And if you do, then they need to be the ones to just come up with it. I mean, I don't understand why we make these things so hard. If you have no money or no, just whatever you're lacking, you got somebody that can do something and put something together. And if you don't have somebody you can trust to do that, that's a problem that needs to be dealt with first out right there.
Oh yeah. I mean, think about that if you say, well, nobody in my agency, in my organization, my company, my department has the skill to teach this next level, it's like, oh my God, you have way bigger issues. Either you truly don't trust the people around you,
yes,
which means that you're the problem, or you've managed to create or be part of an organization that hasn't developed their people. And that's not a good sign. But even with that, a lot of times, what's that classic saying in the fire service? You're never an expert except 60 miles outside of where you work. Yeah. You know, I mean, that doesn't that hold true? Well, shoot, go 60 miles in any direction. Hey, everybody thinks you're the bomb. Can you come over here and talk? Yeah. You know, I'll take you out to lunch. You know, I'll give you a strong cup of coffee, whatever it takes. You're exactly on point. It can't be a rationalization. To say we can't afford it or it's not within our purview. We can't afford that. And I think the fire service has suffered for that for way too long, because it's a problem that's truly across our entire industry.
Yeah. And it's funny as you excuse me, as you're sitting there saying that, I just had a goofy thing go through my mind. You know, you have these air quote book clubs that whatever, mm-hmm. People read books together and talk about, okay, well, if we even want to go even more simple, there are so many great books, even if you just want to pin down firefighter or fire service leadership books. Yes. There are a bunch of them. Yes. Have a book club and talk about I mean, there's so many, and I'm sitting here thinking of this stuff like right now. It's not like we're brainstorming in a think tank about this stuff. So
right.
I just, as you could probably see, these topics get me kind of irritated / fired up pretty easily.
Oh, I'm with you.
Because there's no excuse for it. There's just no excuse. You just leave it right there. And so and it's funny, you said that you had a 6-year period where you didn't have any officer development stuff, and you can feel or at least see the complications that come from that. Yeah. You know, trying to be as careful as I can personally, we have never had any kind of officer development stuff. So you can only imagine what that looks like, and that's a bad deal. Yeah. I've been on for almost 19 years. I've been an officer for 10, and I haven't ever really had anything like that, except for things I go and do on my own. And that sucks. It's just, it sucks.
Yeah. Self-development is a critical part of leadership development. There's no question. And investing in yourself should always be the norm, because then the other extreme is we have our brothers and sisters in these really tight CBAs, or they are in an environment, and I'll just say it for what it is, where unless they get paid, they will literally say, I'm not going. Unless you're paying me time and a half, unless you're giving me the time, I'm not doing it. And so either extreme that exists, that idea that self-development is a critical part of it is true. But to leave it only to that means you're leaving it to chance. I use this phrase, leadership by accident. And that idea that maybe you have cracked the code and you've read the books and you've gone to the conferences and you've talked with the people and all that. But what about your members to the left or your right? And what did they get? And even the idea, when I'll ask a group, what did your organization teach you to make you an effective leader? Of course, the assumption is they're an effective leader. And they'll say, oh, well, I had this captain who, when I got out of recruit school, he mentored me and he taught me all these things, or this chief or whatever. Okay, so wait a minute. So what you're suggesting to me is that your department assigned you purposely to this captain so that you could be mentored, and there's a system in place so that all the other members go, well, no, I mean, that's just where I was assigned when I came out of recruit school. Well, that means it was completely by chance. That's not how you win the battle. Just, hope is not a plan. And that idea is so critical, because that's where we're at. This resource-rich department that I'm in, that I'm very fortunate and happy, proud to be a part of, we just weren't paying the bills. We weren't looking at that as a necessary part of doing business. And if we were doing that, then by extension, it becomes, the problem magnifies. And we're just a representation of the whole American fire service. So to me, these conversations are hopefully beginning to prime the pump a little bit more. And just any dialogue that gets somebody to go, yeah, why aren't we training our officers? If we spend this much time training our new firefighters to be, effective at throwing ground ladders and forcing doors and dragging hose line and starting IVs and all that other stuff, why are we not doing that for our new fire officers? And that analogy has to hold true. So I'm with you.
Yeah, we discussed for a few minutes before I push record, kind of where my name came from as far as the crew first culture. And it ties into this, because that's why I'm here right now. That is why I'm here, because I wanted to do something at my department. I wanted and offered over and over again, man, if you guys ever need me to do something to create officer stuff, I want to help do something for the department to get us in that path. And it's just nothing, just silence. And it just kept building up frustration, building up resentment. I was very mad, very angry. And if I didn't find a good positive outlet very quickly, I was going to be that guy that started doing stupid stuff, sending angry emails and completely undermining my whole message. You know what I mean? And so that's what led me on this path, which I'm very thankful for. But it's still sad to me that it took that's why I'm here. You know what I mean? And even worse is nothing has changed. I'm trying to do my best away from work doing these things, but nothing has changed where I work, where I have devoted 19 years of my life, and that I hate it.
Yeah. Well, I'll give you this. The journey that I was on to get to a point where we have this formalized section was a 12-year journey. And everything you're saying just is ringing so true, because I just started, it started literally with a moment where I looked out at the training ground when I first got assigned to basic, and there was a group doing, a couple of our members really bought into the hose line advancement. Oh my God, I'm such an idiot. Seattle guy.
Nozzle forward.
Nozzle forward. My apologies. It's early in the morning. I'm still
It's all right.
Nozzle forward. So a group of them really bought onto it, and they brought the nozzle forward, and they became instructors, and they're just so motivated. And I'm looking out at this group of firefighters, and it was a hot day. They're dragging line. They're just totally into it. And I said to myself, why do we not have this for officers? Why does this not same concept exist, where we bring in somebody, have this discussion, and get that same vibe going? Because I know we have highly motivated officers who want to do better. And that started the very first move towards this whole thing. But it was born out of frustration, and it took a long time and a lot of beating my head against the wall. I got a lot of, "That's cute, Davidson. Is that going to cost us any money? Because that's just." And there were other voices at the state level in the background, like, "You guys don't want to do that. That's we got it. We got your back." And it's what you're doing is important. Is finding that outlet and saying, "Hey, how do I still spread this message?" And it'll come. That's all you can keep on doing, is keep working the problem, and at some point it will come. And it's not always the as quick as we would like, but it happens. It just takes a long path sometimes.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think even more of a complication for us is it's the retirements have slowed down here in the past couple of years for sure. But we went through probably a five, maybe even up to almost 10-year stretch where we lost a lot of people, retirement wise. And which means right now we have a lot of very young officers, and not, I will say, not myself included, not necessarily age wise, but just in the job.
Sure.
But both ways, we've got some very young age wise officers too. And, these are great people. And I know they have a lot of potential, but they need help. We need help.
Yeah.
You cannot be a good fire service officer without some external help. I'll just say that right now. There's no way. And
training and education,
go ahead.
Everything.
Yeah. It's just such a struggle. And, and what I think another kind of area of frustration is what we do focus on when there is something. It's the tactical stuff or the decision making, things like that, which is like 2% of my job, at the most, maybe not even that. It's like, tell me how to deal with 7 different people and all their personalities and how to get them all motivated. And tell me that, because I don't know how to do that. That's hard. That's when it's not as fun to be an officer. You know what I mean?
Yeah. One of my favorite quotes from a highly dysfunctional officer was, "This job would be great if it wasn't for the people." I couldn't even help myself. "Hey, Dolt, that is the job. People is the job. What would you even think? Why would that even come out of your mouth?" I mean, that's the stupidest statement you could possibly make. And generally speaking, I try and be positive. And that was just one of those moments where you can't be positive. You have completely missed the point. This job is about the people. And exactly what you said. If we only train for the tactical side of the equation, we're going to fail. Because to be effective tactically, you have to build a base beforehand. And that fire ground, the rationalization, quote unquote, but he or she is good on the fire ground. What that says to me really clearly is they suck at everything else. And you hear that constantly. But they're good on the fire ground. Yeah, but that's a 1% problem. I mean, even in Jobtown, wherever that is, they're not fighting fire. And they're in the firehouse. And if they're not building the seeds for success, if they don't understand crew dynamics, conflict management, all those other elements, good, effective small unit leadership, if they don't understand those components, they can't possibly have success on the fire ground, because there's no light switch for dysfunction. It'll display at some point. It'll display itself. So yeah, it's so critical. And without the training and education piece, how the equivalent, again, going back to the new firefighter, the equivalent would be if we just said, tell you what, we're just going to hire 25 people off the street. And once we do the background check, we're going to assign them to a firehouse, and that's it. OJT. You know how much money you would save in your training division and your organization? Just you would blank out all that time and effort, because that's a lot cheaper. Well, we know the results would be catastrophic. But for a new fire officer, that's exactly what we do. We hired you. You took a test. You have the basic capability. We're pretty sure you're not a serial killer. Go to work. Go figure it out. And that model is insane. I always talk about the idea that if the U.S. military trained for leadership the way the American fire service does, we would be like the French and get our asses kicked all day long. We just would, because there's, if you maybe train a little bit at that first entry level rank for officer, and most, that's a lot for the American fire service. That's a big hurdle. Most don't do it at all, but let's say they do a little bit. After that though, or the captain, a battalion chief, deputy chief, assistant chief, successively, what do you train? Nothing. And if you have a general of the army who's still leading like he's leading a platoon, they're going to fail. And conversely, if you have a platoon leader who's leading like he's the general army, they're going to fail. But you have to train and educate for that at each level successively, constantly. It's an effort. And that's part of the problem. Once they start to see the scope of it, I think some of them get scared. They think, oh, I can't eat that elephant. It's just too much. Well, you eat the elephant one bite at a time.
Yeah, start somewhere. Yeah.
In just those little injects. And that's where we started. Just little injects to start the process. And now it's snowballed into something, hopefully, that sustains itself.
Yeah. That's funny. You bring up the military thing, and I don't have any military background, so this probably would even be more of an irritation to me. But it feels like you're hitting on all my irritations here today. But another thing that gets on me is
my wife ends up listening to this. She understands. That's what I do all day long.
But it irritates me that we lean so heavily on this paramilitary organization, because to me, the only military thing about the fire service is that we call our positions, captain and sergeant and those things. Outside of that, like you just said, it's like we don't really do anything associated with the military. We got a little bit of a rank structure. Okay, you can't really, come on now. Everything else just falls apart.
Yeah, and to be clear, what you'll never hear me say is, oh, we got to do things like the military.
I know.
The one thing I do absolutely steal from the military, which I think is critical, is the template, is the model for training for leadership, because they get that absolutely right. The idea though is to take that model and translate it into what works for us, the relevancy piece. And exactly what you're talking about is so critical, because some of the legacy of that hierarchical structure, of that paramilitary bit, first of all, we have a lot of our members who love to talk about the military. And the best expression that I can apply to this, and it's definitely not my own, is everybody loves to talk military shit until they got to do military shit. So if we had a quote unquote Paris Island, if we had a officer candidate school like in Quantico, if we had, you will do this, our members would buckle under in a second. They say they like it, but to truly say, well, then you got to do these things. Oh, wait a minute. No.
Oh yeah.
So, and I'm not suggesting that that's what we need to do, but I'm saying take the elements that work, and just this basic framework for training and education is where we start. But to take the other elements of that, where, and again, you watch Full Metal Jacket. Oh, Gunny Hartman, you will not laugh, you will not cry. You don't want that leader in the firehouse. Are you kidding?
Oh no.
You would never want that.
Yeah.
And so the idea is to understand what our environment is, apply what works, and those parts of that hierarchical, I'm in charge, I make a decision, I only trust me, and all decisions come from me. That's fundamentally flawed in our world. And even, and this is the key point, what the people who don't understand the military well do is they look at that movie, they look at it, it's almost a cartoonish figure of what the military represents, but they look at that and say, that's what the military is. Somebody who yelling as a leadership skill, and they make decisions, go get them. But what they don't see in the background for the effective military leaders is that they are listening. They do take input from their crews, from their teams. And that's what makes them effective and credible and respected. When they need to make a decision, they make one. But in the background of all that is that the fundamentals of what we all view as and know as good leadership. And that's the part that needs to be translated, because without that, they just take it at face value. Oh, I just got to yell a lot and act like I know what I'm doing. And just no matter what anybody says, charge the hill. Nah, that's not how it works.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's, for me, like I said, I don't have a military background. I was not in the military. I don't have a lot of interest in military stuff like Vietnam movies. The guys at the station give me a hard time because I don't dig it. I just can't get into it.
Yeah.
But, or history or anything like that. I've never had much interest in that, but I've started listening to Jocko podcast, and that's a majority of what he talks about, but he twists it into leadership stuff. And that is really, I feel like the more I listen to it, the more I just want to listen to more, because it's almost like it's the leadership stuff I need and want to hear, but he adds in military stuff to it that I don't really know anything about. So it's almost like those two things compound that learning experience for me.
Oh, you just hit on something so crucial. The whole issue is what I call a small dog, petite canine conversation, because not everybody has to be dialed into, oh, the military is awesome. And I love Band of Brothers. And for me, that's my wheelhouse. I'm comfortable with that.
Yeah.
But for somebody else to hear that and go, but maybe Simon Sinek, Malcolm Gladwell, some other voice, a voice in education, a Jocko, maybe, me personally, one of the things, I'm going to get myself in trouble. One of the things about Jocko, the message is solid and it's a great message, but it's literally, if you translate that to Simon Sinek or Brene Brown or anybody else, it's the same thing.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
What's important is how it resonates. Yep. And so if for you that resonates, great. If it doesn't, maybe it's Simon Sinek, maybe it's Brene Brown, maybe it's Malcolm Gladwell, whoever it may be, it doesn't matter as long as you're listening. And one of the things that we talked about this shortly before we started, that I absolutely invest in is that idea of making a small jump. Because for our members, when they hear something that doesn't ring true, they'll discount it in a second. They'll just be like, that doesn't make any sense. That's not me. That's not a bad thing. That's just who our target audience is. We build and design them to make these snap judgments very quickly under strenuous conditions, time compressed, with highly risky outcomes. So they're designed to do that. That's fine. But to get to a point where they can listen to a message on why empathy is a good thing, why the ability to manage conflict is a good thing as a leader, why demonstrating vulnerability is not a bad thing. Sometimes they get right away, oh, that's Dr. Phil and that's huggy stuff and that's not what this job is about. And blah, blah. Okay, fine. I don't want to build that wall. So by having a Jocko, by having a clip from Band of Brothers, open up the possibility of the thought. When you hear Buck Compton and Band of Brothers speak specifically about a leader's heart, it's hard for some 25-year-old firefighter to go, he doesn't know what he's talking about. Yeah. Are you kidding me? This is somebody from the greatest generation who suffered through things you can't even imagine. And he says something that is so fundamental about a leader's heart and understanding his people. If he can say that, you have no reason not to. And so that's a much shorter leap. Once you get them over that wall, oh my God, the possibilities are endless. Then they're like, okay. And we've seen that. We've been very fortunate to have some of our members who were very obstinate at first when we started talking about conflict management and teaching that skill. But then subsequently they would come back and say, man, I was in a situation and this thing happened and it worked. It actually worked. And that's a big deal. That's a big deal. So I think your experience is so crucial in understanding what's effective. It doesn't always have to be about, the military. It's in fact, if you're doing it well, you're hitting from a whole bunch of different perspectives. it's important that any one of those clicks in, and that's the battle. That's the battle.
Yeah. You talked about the Jocko and Cynic and all these people are basically saying the same things. They're saying them differently. They're using different contexts and all that. And that's always been a very interesting kind of conversation topic, whatever you want to call it, to me. And it's also a baseline of something that I feel very strong about is put out your message, share your message. I don't care who you are. I don't care where you come from. You have a message and somebody needs to hear it, and it's so interesting that you can have somebody like a Maxwell that has literally reached millions and millions of people, but there are a lot of people out there that don't care for it.
Right.
And maybe a Jocko, maybe that's the kind of people those people lean to. Yeah. But then there's some people that, a Marc Davidson, a Jeremy Sanders, Bill Thomas from who knows where, that's who they need to hear. And it's so, it just means so much to me that there are people out there that need to hear your message. Step up and start sharing it.
Yeah. No, and what you hit on is just that diversity of voices. And even that word in our industry gets people twitchy. They're like, oh, diversity, but that's what it is. I have a whole conversation of iron versus steel and which one is stronger. And that fundamentally speaks to the idea, because there are plenty of people who think I'm absolutely full of shit. There's just a laundry list of them. I get it. Hey, I think I'm full of shit most days. But to have somebody else, to listen to you, to listen to somebody else and go, what he said or what she said clicks. I dig that. That's what we're after. If anything, it's almost, I would say, the upside of COVID, just the explosion of content and these discussions. To me, this has been, I hope it lasts, that it continues going forward, has been just these conversations are happening at a much more rapid pace. And that message in all levels is getting out there. And there's very few people who can honestly go, oh, I didn't know. No, nobody told me that effective leadership was important. If you're Ted Kaczynski in your cabin out in the woods, maybe, but other than that, I think we're starting to really see people value that discussion and to have all these voices, you, Corley, just saying, hey, this is what we need, is good stuff. It's really good stuff.
I think that's a really interesting kind of idea that you threw out there. And as you're talking, I'm kind of throwing it around in my head, so pre-COVID, you obviously have a lot of fired up people in the fire service still. But these people that are fired up for the fire service back then are going to conferences, and they're kind of concentrating themselves in these areas. Now you take that away. So these people that are usually sharing that passion and all that in those concentrated areas are now being dispersed. And we're flooding the social media and flooding the podcast area. And I feel like maybe back then, before COVID, the social media stuff was so negative and people were jumping on. I honestly feel like I don't see much of that anymore. Maybe that's just because I don't involve myself in anybody that does that. Sure. But back when I first started, and that was right around, the kind of maybe a month or two before all that hit, it was anytime I put something out, a video or something, I was getting hammered. But I can't even tell you the last time I had a negative comment on any of my stuff. And I feel like it's like a light bulb moment when you said that. It's like, maybe that's why, because all these passionate, fired up people are like me, having to find other ways to get this out. And so we have flooded, all these other avenues. That's it. It's really interesting.
Yeah. And I think it's a function not only of, now there's so much more. Before there was very few places. So that troll in the basement who's sitting there like, oh, I'll show them. They don't know what they're talking about because clearly it shows this and whatever that crap is. First of all, now it's not a few targets, it's thousands of targets. So that already starts to dilute their ability to make an impact. And what we're finally seeing is stronger voices step up and say, dude, shut the fuck up.
Yeah.
Nobody wants to hear your shit. And so they start getting pounded on. And now that plurality of voices is finally starting to raise the conversation. One of the things on the group that I have is that it's not even I don't even engage in a two-way conversation. I just don't. You know, this is a one-way forum just to get some information out there. Do with it what you will, but we're not here to discuss other than in a positive way. And even if you don't agree, that's fine. But it has to be in a positive fashion. It has to be something constructive. I do believe that in that other point you hit on where, you know, it was focused on conferences. And I love conferences, just to talk with people and network and go grab a beer afterwards, no question. But if you think about the fact that there are ostensibly 1.2 million firefighters in North America, how many people can you crowd into Indy or Nashville, now Columbus, or any one of these places? Yeah. You're getting such a small percentage. Now, ripples in a pond, they go back and spread that word. But that impact is nowhere near as much as it's been now. And even the large conferences have been forced to say, hey, let's broadcast this material out there, all these webinars. And the craft conferences is a phrase I've thrown at it, that are coming up. You know, those are so vital. Just these much smaller groups, these leaders who are saying, hey, look, we can't afford to go to Indy. We can't afford to go to Columbus. You know, we got to do something here in our backyard. And yeah, we've got SMEs right where we're at. Let's put on some coffee, put out some flyers, and get some people to come together. And it's been some really, really good stuff. Virginia's been very fortunate for that because Fireground Commander, Andy Frederick's Training Day, and the 350 line folks, you know, they're concentrated between Richmond and DC, or a narrow path along I-95. We're incredibly fortunate. And then the state has a conference. So that idea of building those up, I'm not saying it replaces them, but augmenting that with all this material and all this good positive stuff is a big deal for us, I think. And hopefully we don't go back from it.
Yeah, that's I said it before, it's very interesting kind of since you said that, how it kind of clicks and all that makes sense. And you know, I agree. I hope that once everything starts opening up more, and it already has, you know, there's big time conference going on right now in Florida, that hopefully we kind of keep some of that middle ground, you know, keeping, like you said, there's a very small percentage of people going to these conferences. And yes, you know, the few that go and come back, there is some ripple effects, but you know, depending on what they're going back to, they could be going back to toxic environments that completely snuff out whatever they're bringing back, and it's absolutely worthless. And so you can't, we're going to have to find other ways to keep this going besides that. So I completely agree with that.
Yeah. Yeah. And that idea, and this goes to your crew first culture. I think that culture kills policy. Culture kills ideas. Culture will kill a lot of incipient thinking. And that's unfortunate, and it's hard. And for somebody who is coming back from that environment of learning or just seeing something different and saying, hey, I got this great idea. This is the way we've always done it, or that's a stupid idea. It won't work. And well, maybe it won't work, but at least consider it. That's all that takes, is even that consideration. Because at the point where you have a member come back with this idea, or somebody say, hey, I'm willing to try this, at least consider it. And if nothing else, you leave the possibility open, the door open for that future next idea to come in. But when you just slam the door, you know, before you even say hello, just slam the door shut, that's ineffective. That's ineffective. And that is unfortunate that it happens. But then we can talk about perseverance and resiliency, because that member has to keep at it. We do live in a conflict avoidant world, and we do have folks that when they hear no, they're just like fainting goats and fall over and, well, I tried. No, you got to keep on trying. you got to get back in there. And sometimes that may not make you the most popular. That may not make it, you may be banging your head against the wall, but you've got to keep at it, because if you know you've got the solution to a problem, or a potential solution to a problem, just to hear no once and say, I tried, I gave it a shot, they didn't listen. That's not effective either. So it takes both sides of that equation to push forward.
Yeah. It's funny, I got a chance to go visit a fire station just south of where I live, 100 miles away from where I work.
Mm-hmm.
So the areas around where I live are a long way from the departments I work with
Mm-hmm.
at the department. But I got invited to go to a fire station just south of where I live a couple weeks ago, and it was a cool experience, just getting to a firehouse that I haven't really gotten a chance to go anywhere like that. But
Mm-hmm.
he was just walking around, showing me everything and showing me their pre-connects, and it's a very interesting concept that they're working with. I'll just say that.
Mm-hmm.
And he was talking to me about his struggles with it, and trying to get some change done, and just kind of hitting some walls. And so I next shift I was on, I kind of started messing with maybe some other options with him. This had nothing, like 0% of anything that I was going to do for our department. There's no piece of my mind thinking that I'm going to change anything we were doing. I was just trying to find a solution for somebody else.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And we sat there, and a couple of my guys came out and wanted to play along. So we messed with it for a while. It was like 34 degrees outside. It was freaking cold. And they said, hey, why don't we load it up on our prop and we'll just pull it a few times, see how it works. What I'm saying, and I'm trying to tie it into what you're saying, is that had nothing to do with us as procedures and all that.
Right.
But we still got training out of it. We still got good stuff out of it. We learned and we did something, and it was helpful. And like you said, okay, maybe it doesn't fit what we're doing or fit our department.
Yeah.
But I guarantee you there's something you can learn from it. Maybe a piece that you can pull from it, or maybe a way that you can do what you are doing better. Something.
Yeah.
Something is better than nothing and just shutting it down.
Exactly. And the ripples in the pond for your guys is now they've thought outside the box. They are open now to a new possibility, which they probably never considered before. The fact that you had a crew willing to go out in 34 degrees minus the snivel and just get the job done that's a big deal. And that's why I said before, I really dig that crew first name, that turn of a phrase, because that's servant leadership. That's you saying, hey, I'm going to go out and do this. This isn't about me. This isn't my betterment. I just think this is an idea that's interesting. And the fact that you are empowering your crew to come out there with you because they know, hey, he's out there, I'm out there, I'll give it a shot. That's a big deal. And it goes to what we talked about before about that small hurdle, because if you tell a group of hard, rough and tough firefighter dudes and dudettes, servant leadership, I'm not serving anybody. I'm not a servant. Well, you turn that phrase and you say, well, crew first. Oh yeah, I'm first. That idea helps get over that hurdle and gets them into acceptance. And once they accept and understand that, that's going to carry forward for a much longer time than we're around.
Yeah. And that's, the whole crew first thing. And we talked a little bit about it before, but, I expressed a little concern to a friend of mine not long after creating it that, I don't want it to be perceived as, oh, well, we have this them first movement going on right now. And this guy is totally against that. He's saying that we're first. Well, no, that's not, that is not even close to what I am about.
Mm-hmm.
I am about taking care of my people as a leader, because I know if I take care of them, and I know if they respect me and trust me, that we are going to put them in the best possible situation that they can be put in, if that kind of makes sense.
No, absolutely. My tagline, the MFPF, is a turn of a phrase, mission first, people first. The Army had it as mission first, people always, and there's different variations of that you hear. To me, they're co-equal. They are absolutely yin and yang, intertwined. You can't have one without the other, because the people first part comes in two categories, two flavors. The people being your crew, your team, the people who are going to get the job done. You can't possibly accomplish the mission without them. It doesn't work. I don't know anybody that is that good where they're going to drive the rig to the scene, hit the water supply, deploy the hand line, charge the line, advance the line, put out the fire over it. Come on. It doesn't happen. The other side of that people is the people we serve. They're first. They at times they will come above us in that hierarchy. But you can't, it's grading shades of gray. You can't say, oh, it's always the citizens. It absolutely is. But if I can't push a tenable position, I'm not going to throw my people inside of there to no end. And conversely, if my crew is exhausted and I need to give them 20 minutes to get something to eat, and then there's a public service call that I can dish off to a company that's nearby, absolutely, because unless my people are fed and ready to hit the street, they can't accomplish the mission. So it's this whole, it's never one strictly above the other. They absolutely exist on equal plane, and that's the leader's art. That's why there's no science to this. It's always about the art, because it just depends. There's no cookie cutter approach to how you invoke that or how you lead. And that's the difficult part, because it isn't just do step one, do step two, do step three, and you'll be really, really good.
Yeah, that's for sure. Yeah. Something I want to touch on, I want to make sure that we hit on before we end this, because it was the main kind of topic I wanted to bring up, and we just kind of keep going on other things that are interesting. So I didn't want to break away, but you mentioned sniveling earlier, just a few minutes ago. And that's a big, I was just kind of cruising through your group a little bit before we started, and I saw that, you reposted the Von Oppen quote. And,
that was brilliant.
and talked about that.
Good stuff.
But that's another big thing to me is, people that gripe and don't have any solutions to it. It's just griping, and that it's just starting to irritate me more and more and more. And I have gripes. I'm sitting here telling you about some of my gripes as well. So I'm not saying having gripes is the problem, but you got to have some type of, and it goes right back to how you started this whole conversation, is that phone call. Somebody called you out, and basically you stepped up. Okay, that's the difference. So talk to me about that, kind of your thinking on that post and what you said to it, and just kind of go into that for a little bit.
Yeah, his posts are I like, because they're so clean and simple, but very impactful, and I dig that. So it's just a few key words that he said, and it just spoke to something that we know exists in any industry, but in the fire service in particular, because we have a kitchen table at the firehouse where all that that's the stew. That's where we allow that stew to simmer, and it's critical, because the problem we're faced with, and there's a whole discussion about who has the most impact in the fire service. And my strong feeling, and I talk on this a lot, is that it is the company officer. The company officers, where the strategic level leader can issue policy all day long, don't suck, be good. But whatever that translates to, by the time it gets to the company officer, the shift leader, that voice in the firehouse, that's where it all lives or dies. And so when you have that environment where this one leader just complains all day long, the agency sucks, the citizens suck, the calls suck, this job would be great if it wasn't for the people, crap like that. And then now you're the troop, you're the subordinate in that environment. You've got nowhere to go. You're trapped in that firehouse for whatever the period of time is. As this person, it could be sunny, rainbows, Yingling waterfalls and puppy kisses outside. But to hear it, it's the most awful place in the world.
Yeah.
And that goes to that line about people don't leave jobs, they leave bosses. And almost without exception, I have the ability in my organization to look at our transfer request list. Okay. Well, first of all, when people leave the organization, it's not generally speaking because of the pay, the benefits, the bigger picture. It's because where they were assigned in that dysfunctional environment that we're in. Within the agency, transfer request lists, I'll look at those. And I've actually done, I would call them lab experiments, where I see 6 or 7 people at a 2-piece house, basically the entire shift with transfer requests in. And I'll investigate, make some phone calls, find out what's going on. And it's a clear indicator of dysfunctional leadership. Subsequently, maybe a transfer occurred and that leader was moved out. New one within 2 weeks, all the transfer requests are pulled. Yeah. That's what that speaks to. And that inability for that company officer to understand, instead of complaining to the people who have the least amount of influence in the entire organization, a 6-month probie firefighter listening to you complain about the problems in the agency and what we should be doing and what we could be doing and this and that, that's a bullshit cowardice expression right there. Because that probie has nothing to do but go, yes, sir, yes, ma'am. You know, if you really have some intestinal fortitude, go complain to the bosses. Go complain to the people who can actually change the thing you're complaining about. Bring a solution and then get ready to go to work. Because if you're not going to do that, do us all a favor, shut the fuck up. Because now my ears are bleeding and it just makes for a miserable work day. And that's the part that's difficult to get across. And we're, you know, when you talk about changing culture, getting leaders to understand that, it does you no good. Yeah. And Von Appen answered back on the one thread, and he said, "Gripes go up." That's a direct quote out of Saving Private Ryan, and I actually use that clip when I teach. Where if you've seen the movie, he basically explains to his troops, "Hey, look, I don't complain to you; I complain up." That's it. It's a little more than that. There's a little bit of sarcasm built into it, but yeah. At the end of the day, that's the idea, is to get our leaders to understand, if you're going to bitch about something, bitch to the people who can actually change it and save the rest of us, and then do something about it. Because then when your troops see that, they model that behavior. They're less likely to just snivel about something because they're like, hey, the boss is about rolling his sleeves up and making shit happen. If I'm going to complain about something that I can influence, then I'm going to come to him or her with a solution. And guess what? That's what we all want. Because and that's the problem, and I'll stop on the train here in a second. That's also the problem, is their failure to recognize that they don't like it when the troops come to them and complain. But they fail to recognize, well, you're doing the same thing. You're influencing that behavior. They're modeling what you're doing. Yeah. And in the process, you're making what should be just an awesome day. Any day at the firehouse is an awesome day. Yeah. And I can tell you, any day at the firehouse is better than a day at the office. I can tell you that from experience. But, and I kid. At the end of the day, that's important, just even that connection. And so we've got to build out of that cultural piece where we have leaders that think, oh, that's just what you're supposed to do. It's a firehouse. We have a kitchen table. We're supposed to get to the kitchen table and snivel about whatever's bothering us. Yeah. Yeah. So I'm with you. And it doesn't have to be like, oh, my favorite superhero, Emmett. It doesn't have to be everything is awesome. That's false also. But understand that what you're complaining about has to be something that's relevant, that truly is not going to deteriorate your team dynamic, because that's what you're building for. If you're a leader, that's your whole goal, is to have an effective team. So, yeah. Anyways, that's my rant.
No, and this is something I've said a couple times, and I feel like I need to say it every time I get a chance, because it's my version of my mistakes, hopefully sharing with others so that they don't make them. But that, a little bit of what you're talking about, I fell into that a couple years ago. I was a very new officer. I had built up what I felt like were good teams a couple times, and I had pieces taken away for reasons that weren't really making sense to me. And I was mad. Mm-hmm. It made me angry. And so, I was doing a lot of complaining to my people. I I will say this though, I was also complaining above. It wasn't me just being a coward and sticking it down there. I
Mhm.
was complaining above too, and it was going nowhere.
Mhm.
But it was very wrong of me to do that. And how I justified it in my head is, well, these people are the people that I am closest to. This is my air quotes second family.
Mhm. Mhm.
So, you know, I I just need to be honest with them, and I don't want to keep things from them, and all these justifications.
Sure.
But it led to exactly what you were talking about. It led to, this is who we are. We gripe about everything, and we are angry at admin, and that's who I created.
Yeah.
And so ever since I kind of woke up and figured out, well, that's not okay,
Yeah.
I have had to fight that. And I am still fighting the ripple effects, as you keep saying,
Yeah.
of that. And that's just part of, I did it. So, I got nobody to gripe at about it but myself. You know what I mean? And so I try to share that with as many people as I can, because, don't do that to yourself. It's not where you want to be,
Yeah.
and it's not a road you want to have to fight back from. So just don't do it.
Yeah.
But
No,
it's
good
easy to
stuff.
do.
Yeah, no, good stuff. And I like to talk on what I call the shallow glide path into leadership versus a controlled flight into terrain. And that's a longer discussion. But exactly what you said is you you want to set those bricks up so that when you make that move and you have that moment, it's not a jarring hard or right or left turn into that leadership moment. And but what you're saying is so critical, so important. And I hope a lot of people latch onto that, which is that idea that you can build out of it. You can have that recognition. You've done what a lot of leaders can't and won't do, which is self-assess and say, hey, what do I got to do different? What am I creating? My top 10 list of screw ups is epic. Oh my God, spectacular. And that's the battle, is to go, yeah, I totally botched that. Let me not do it a second time, and let me figure out how I can build out of this wreckage. And do I got to apologize to somebody? Do I got to train harder? Do I got to learn more? What is it I got to do to build out of this to make this better for the future? Because unfortunately, I left the Hindenburg in the rear view mirror, so I got to do what I can. And that's an important part of leadership, is to have that recognition and be able to say, yep, I'm going to move forward, I'm going to do better, and I'm going to try and show that next group. I mean, literally, why else would we be doing this? This isn't about us. This is about, hopefully somebody latches onto it, and then this pays off dividends going forward. And that's the every day in the classroom or out teaching. That's the whole gig. It's just to hope there are those ripples in a pond that affect change and make things better across the board.
Yeah. And that, going back to what brought us here, that hinges mainly on people that want to do something, people that want to take action, doing something for the good instead of just griping, or even just, and it's not even just the griping, the physical act of getting it out. There's a lot of people out there that don't gripe, but they're not happy with the way things are. They just keep it inside.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't, that's not much better.
Sure.
If you're not happy with something, if you see something that needs to be fixed, the whole see a need, fill a need,
Mm-hmm.
that's what's going to change things. That's what's going to turn things around. It's doing the work, getting out, making the changes that need to be done.
Yeah. Frank Viscoso, when I saw him years ago, said a phrase which I should have known already in my life, because I've been in that environment, and he said, don't walk past a problem that you can fix.
Yep.
The way he said it at the time just it like smacked me in the head. Like, yeah, of course. Why would you? Why would a leader do that? And I should have known better. I was in a point in my career also where I was like, I wasn't part of what got me on the path I'm on was I dealt with a highly dysfunctional fire service leader. And I was at a point where I was going to leave the organization, and I said, this isn't for me, and all that other stuff. but fundamentally, that is the phrase that struck with me.
Yeah, yeah. I think that right there, that is such a huge. That's almost like something. I'm trying to think of a good way to say this and mean it as important as it is to me. It's almost like I have a 10 commandments of things, that are in stone that everybody should just live by, and that's something that should be on that, and it's a lesson that I try to teach my kids all the time. It's a lesson that we have talked about at the fire station. I don't care if you made the mess. If you see it, just pick it up. It's
Mhm.
just the right thing to do. You know, and that goes, like I said, it goes at home. It
Mhm.
goes at the firehouse when we see, boxes over in the corner that somebody else left.
Right, right,
We could sit here and gripe for 30 minutes about it, or we can just take 2 minutes, go take them out of the trash and be done with it.
right.
And so, yeah, that's a huge, huge deal
Yeah.
that goes from A to Z all the way through life for sure.
And that one piece that you mentioned, I think you got to wrap it up. It is General Powell has a clip where he gets asked, "What's the most important trait of leadership?" And he goes on to answer that. It's a stunningly impactful video. It's an interview that he does, and it's in 3.5 minutes. Everything you've ever wanted to know about leadership. But during a point in that, he talks about the fact that the leader can't, even when they're cold and tired and hungry, they can't act like they're cold, hungry, and tired and hungry. And they've got to sometimes put on the brave face. And it's not to say that they aren't feeling those things, but there are times where they have to put on that, hey, look, it's going to still be okay. Because if you allow your troops to think, oh, this sucks, this is the worst thing ever, they're going to feel that. They internalize that, and then they carry that message forward. And you just reminded me that video clip, it talks specifically about that. And the context is in, the military, and he's in Vietnam as a small unit leader. Again, get past that bridge, translate it to what it is for us in the fire service. And that kitchen table is really a central piece of that.
Yeah, I'll have to look that up. Sounds like
I'll send you a link. It's good.
Okay.
To me, it's like, if you had 5 minutes to teach a leadership class, roll that clip.
Well, Marc, kind of getting into just starting to wrap everything up, I'd like to just hear from your personal experience, what are some of the biggest things that you have learned since becoming, in that training environment, in the training division, and all of that? Because I know, and I had a Oklahoma City training officer on, Justin Lorenzen, a few weeks ago, and these are just interesting things for me to hear, because they see so wide of a spectrum of people and crews and all that. So
Yeah.
what are some lessons that you have learned being on that side?
Well, application of leadership in a small unit environment is I have to pick my words carefully. It's easy. It's not easy, but it's easy, because in a sense, I've got to influence, lead, supervise, manage, however you want to put it, 5, 6, 8 people, depending on the environment that I'm in. In a training environment, in an environment where you're trying to influence an entire organization, to build a systems-based approach. And I am the founding member of what I call the Double G fan club. That would be Gordon Graham. I'm like one of his original groupies. And he says it. It's about systems. It's always about systems. And unless you have a systems-based approach to train and educate your members, you're going to fail as an organization. No ifs, ands, or buts about it. And the problem the fire service has is we have, generally speaking, from one coast to the other, fairly effective systems in place to train our newest members. They exist. Your Pro-V, well, I don't care if it's a volunteer agency with one, fire company with one house, or 10,000 member fire department. We have those structures there in one way, shape, or form. What they look like can be wildly divergent, but they're there. The issue in creating a systems-based approach for training fire officers is that it, in large measure, doesn't exist, or it's such a small effort. And when all you got to do is look at the budget. It's that classic line: show me where you spend your money, you show me where your priorities are. Yeah. And when you look at how much money is invested on the front end, and time and resources for any agency, it's a fair amount. Then ask the question, how much are you dedicating to professional development, leadership development, officer development? It ranges anywhere between 0 to 5%. That is catastrophic for us, because the outcome of that in the firehouse and on the fire ground is so self-evident. And when we look at, all you got to do is turn on the 11 o'clock news, look at the latest blog, the news bits on, these failed leadership environments, and it's dysfunctional leaders that are, doing ridiculous things. Well, that's what we have to get to. And so to be in that environment, what I've come to understand so clearly, and I knew it a little bit from my time in basic training, but again, that's still a smaller group. That's a group of 20, 30, 40 recruits. Yeah. To take that to an officer corps in our agency of 431, and remember, it's not about your existing leaders, it's about your existing and your future leaders. Because if you start training for leadership the day they get promoted, the only word I can apply to this, you're fucked. You are already behind the 8 ball. You have to start training for leadership and followership during training week 1. That's when you have that idea that I'm going to start training them to be leaders in my organization from the first day they arrive all the way forward. That's when success will happen.
Sit down. Yeah. Sorry, I got kids.
No, you're good. Hey, no worries at all. Hey, you can pop them in there if you want.
No, that's good stuff. And like I said, I think those are important for us, because I put out a little kind of a mindset episode here a couple days ago about perspective. Mm-hmm. And it's so easy for us. And I feel like maybe this is more of a personal thing right now going on, but I feel like it's so easy to have a divide between these on the line guys and these admin people, if it's training or EMS or whatever it is. And it's so easy to happen because I don't know anything about your job. Mm-hmm. I know that I can very quickly say, or very quickly feel like, man, these people are not supporting us. That's their job, is to support us. And all they want is more and more and more. And they don't really understand what we have already. It's very easy to fall into that trap. And so that's kind of the background of why I wanted to ask that question, is because we need to, and it's empathy, and that's another piece of that. Mm-hmm. And you kind of mentioned a little bit of this earlier about griping down and not understanding that what you are irritated about is really what you're doing to somebody else. It's having some empathy, understanding, okay, what I may perceive on the surface is probably not really the case, because I don't really know what's going on. And so it's a very important piece of hopefully something that will get us to a better place as the fire service in general.
Yeah, that idea of just creating that civil war between day work and field operations admin, it is so simple to fall into that trap, because when you're on the line, your perception is that, oh my God, more training, and now we got to go back up, and now they want me to do this. Don't they know I'm saving lives and making a difference? And what we forget is that this isn't like a Fortune 500 company where we hire a bunch of people off the street to come in and do these functions. Everybody every uniform member started out on the line at some point. Yeah. And now, but to your point, what I think is important is not only you're speaking for that empathy for the line guy or gal to understand, hey, look, they got needs, but it comes the other way too, because there are times where when you're in, Puzzle Palace, when you're at, in under fluorescent lights, that if you don't make that connection, that just because I think this is a good idea, what's the net impact? So that empathy has to go both ways, because if all we do is just throw, requirement after requirement and don't build in the capacity, don't build in the time, don't build in the resources, that's not effective either. So it's a conversation that's important that goes both ways.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's kind of the road that we have to take if we're truly going to make this thing better. It's going to take everybody being involved in doing that. It's not just admin. You can't just blame, well, these guys are making it hard on us because they're putting all that blah, blah, blah. It's everybody. Everybody has got to do a better job. Everybody can do a better job. Yeah, so.
Absolutely.
Well, I have very much appreciate your time, Mark. I've truly enjoyed the conversation. I've got some notes that I try to start with, and we barely even touched them. But that's that's the fun thing about this is, it goes where it goes, and
Yeah.
and hopefully maybe we can come get you back and kind of touch on some different
Yeah,
things as
no,
well. So
absolutely. Or, if you're ever in this neck of the woods, we'll have a beer and we can hit all the rest of those up. I've had occasion to be in Oklahoma a couple times, so now I'll definitely
oh
give
yeah,
it a yell if I'm back out there again.
sounds good. So you got your Facebook group. Go ahead and just tell us a little bit about that and any kind of contact information you want to put out there, how people can find you.
Yeah, I've got a Facebook group. I don't put a lot into it. It's a public group, but I compartmentalize my life. So I've got my regular page where I'm not one of these guys that says, "Hey, look, I'm selfie. I'm getting a cup of coffee and selfie. I'm going shopping." Every now and again I'll put something on my personal page. I've got the one for the fire department. I got one going back to my time dressing like a tree. So the Marc Davidson officer development training, if you want to, and again, to me, that's a platform for an exchange of ideas. I've got people, I'm not one of these people like only I post on there. As long as you got something positive, something that's an idea. So we have all these different fire service leaders that are posting material on there. We had one the other day from a chief down in Texas talking about, hey, officer development programs. It was awesome because the next thing you know, there's like 15 posts from different people on ideas for officer development, and hey, we tried this and connect, made connections, and so that's the idea for that. Just about leadership in the fire service and the fire service more broadly, and so yeah, hit me up on there. You know, do some of the shows and try and talk and get the word out wherever I can. And, if anybody wants to reach out on Messenger, hit me up and we can chat it up. So.
Sounds good. Had a good time. Look forward to getting into some more conversation later for sure. I enjoyed
Absolutely. I really appreciate it. Like I said, love getting the opportunity to talk about this stuff. So thanks a lot. And thanks for what you're doing.
No problem. All right, everybody. Thank you for joining us. Look forward to having you back next time. Until then, everybody stay safe and take care of each other. Thank you.
Take care.